Welcome. I'm Brad Dacus, President and founder of the Pacific Justice Institute. We're committed to defending religious freedom, the sanctity of human life, and parental rights, along with other civil liberties. Now, this movie you're about to watch, it's graphic. It's for mature audiences only. After it's over, you want to stay around because we're going to have a very open roundtable discussion talking about the solutions to these problems. Now, without further ado, I'm proud to present Sex Ed, Let Parents Decide.
Hundreds of parents were at the state capitol today and they were protesting new guidelines for sex education in public schools.
They say they're concerned that a new sex education curriculum goes too far and takes away their parental rights.
When I got involved in this journey over a year ago, I never imagined that it was going to get as big as it has.
This is one of these battles in life where you drop absolutely everything and you go to the hills, because this is the hill I die on.
We at Pacific Justice Institute have been fighting this for quite some time, but never at the degree and the level that we're dealing with it right now. This is not just about sex education. This is about a movement to impact and influence children in public schools across the country.
If parents knew what was happening, I think they'd be very, very alarmed.
No, this is about sexual roles together, boys, girls, boys and boys, girls and girls.
You can't teach this in an unbiased way. It's a moral topic.
Little children would be exposed to gender identity questions and alternate lifestyles.
When we tell parents, they're livid, they're angry because they want to protect their children.
The bottom line is our kids are not being educated. Whatever they're doing is not working.
There is no sexual morality beyond if it feels good, do it.
It's in government, it's in our medical societies, it's activists promoting this.
This isn't the way that I would want my own children taught about something as important as this in their life.
One of the things that California has done through something called the California Healthy Youth Act is that California has now mandated a number of topics that never used to be considered part of sex education. The California Healthy Youth Act now requires that school districts cover topics like gender identity, gender expression, and abortion.
And you have things as gender bears, you have things as dental dams, you have dildos, teaching kids how to put prophylactics on an erect penis for 5th graders.
But in middle school, they'll bring in a penis model and then they used to put condoms on that.
They had the students line up on a gender spectrum and to plug in wherever they saw themselves fit on this gender spectrum. In addition, they had a Q&A with the students, and based on their response, they would shuffle to one side of the class or the other side of the class. And again, having a public response on something.
They give a very explicit description of vaginal sex that I didn't think was quite necessary for 10-year-old kids. In addition to that, they actually highlight the women's sexual anatomy in a very explicit photo and ask the children to label the parts of a woman's body, that is sexual reproduction, and to color in, for example, the anus, which was part of the sexual anatomy, and the clitoris, and so on and so forth. And I thought that that was not quite appropriate for 10-year-olds.
These are very, very sensitive issues, and they'll be taught in a classroom with boys and girls together. The topics also are what many parents would be considering pornographic.
It's not age appropriate, it's not medically accurate, it goes way beyond the law. They want the girls and boys together, they want them to negotiate sexual opportunities, like, well, let's practice negotiating, like you want sex, I don't, let's negotiate through that. They talk about sex toys, they talk about, you know, hey, you know, you can decide what your gender is. We just think it's too soon, and something the parents should have kind of the first foray into teaching their kids about this stuff.
We're talking about at any age where the teacher believes it's appropriate, because the state does not mandate this kind of training to that young of students, but if the teacher thinks it's appropriate, it's going to happen.
Right. The door is wide open.
That's right.
For school districts to do that, it's up to their discretion.
This is pushing, and you use that term, and I think it's an adequate and great term, pushing the children in this direction. We're not informing them. We are pushing them to accept this valueless use of sexuality.
The explicitness of this curriculum is going to be harmful to children. And in fact, we know that there is harm because when you see the STDs and the STI rates across the nation, not just in California, but across the nation, they are extremely high. They are considered epidemic or skyrocketing by the CDC. You know, it's one thing to talk about reproduction or how a human life comes to be, and then it's another thing to start talking about sex acts and sex behavior and sexual pleasure.
When we go beyond the curriculum and we talk about the framework and the books that were referenced in the framework, they have a book called Sexxx, S-E-X. It talks about body fluid and blood play.
Teaches children how to perform BDSM, oral sex, fisting, how to make sex toys with household items. This book, which we had removed, it's called What's Happening to My Body. Right inside it teaches little girls how to manually stretch their hymen. 5th grade girls, if they can't get a tampon to fit. This book has a list of slang words to call the woman's private parts and the men's. And it also tells little boys it's perfectly normal to masturbate with other little boys because everyone does it. This one right here there's a lot wrong with this book, but this one actually gives them details how to perform oral sex. It tells them how tingly and great and how that explosion of pleasurable feelings would have them have an orgasm. This is for 5th grade as well. This is still in the framework. Then we found this one. It has inappropriate pictures. This one, for example, is a penis inside a vagina. And it says, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, here we come. And inside the uterus, it says, tee-hee, tee-hee, you'll never catch me. And this is for 3rd grade, recommended for 3rd grade. We were able to have this removed, but they can still use it. It's not banned, just removed. This one tells children that their sex was assigned at birth by adults who looked at their body and made a guess as of to what they were. And then it tells them it's assigned at birth. And only they, meaning 6-year-olds, know what they are. We've had psychologists, counselors, and they all said this is inappropriate. Children cannot process this information, it's harmful. The people that removed them said they were removing them not because there was anything wrong with them, but because they became a distraction. So the California Department of Education still believes these books are appropriate for our school. And these are the people that are making decisions over our children's education.
It wasn't until I was trained by Planned Parenthood to reach out to teenagers that I began to feel conflicted about the education. Because basically the education introduced sex to children, and it introduced it in a really graphic way. Really the approach was to look at kids and to just assume that they would definitely be sexually active in every way possible. All of a sudden we're just bombarding them with sexual activities, talking about sexual violence, showing them videos of teenagers getting out of bed and knowing that they just had sex. And all of this to a 13-year-old kid, it was actually giving them this false message that you had to have sex.
The parent should be involved, teaching the boy how to control, how to delay the gratification, how to control himself. And girls, on the other hand, should be taught how to control themselves.
According to Ed Code, you are supposed to teach abstinence as an option and make a valuable case for it. And yet not all districts are doing that, especially with those that are hiring outside providers. Abstinence is just listed and briefly highlighted as another means of birth control.
I thought abstinence, the way it was taught before, is you don't engage in sex, period. They say, no, this is abstinence because these are sexual activities that won't result in pregnancy.
If we are going to have any kind of sex education in the schools, it should be sexual risk avoidance.
People don't really know the difference between comprehensive sex ed or sexual risk avoidance. And you hear the word like comprehensive and you think, oh, well, that encompasses everything that I would want my child to know. And that really isn't true. The premise is that if you use protection, and you get consent from your partner, it really doesn't matter what age you are, as long as there's consent and what they perceive to be protection, then you're good to go. We teach a primary prevention health model, which with every other risky activity that youth can do or be involved in, you want to teach them not to engage in it, and if they are engaging, to stop.
Which is a primary health model that's been used for smoking cessation or don't do drugs, like just don't do it and avoid the risk altogether. Kids who graduate from high school, have a full-time job and wait until at least age 21 to have children, and preferably in marriage, can avoid poverty. And that's something that legislators and families can all get behind.
You know, the curriculum that we created, the program has been successful because the classroom teachers love it. They see what's happening in the youth population every day. You can choose to be abstinent. That is a choice that you get to make. And here's what it will do for your future if you choose that. But when you talk to them in the perspective of how this is going to impact their future, they thank us for coming into their school and telling them the truth.
Groups like Planned Parenthood are being invited in to not just high schools, but junior highs to talk to young children about, quote, safe sex.
If two kids are 11 and they have sex and have a pregnancy, they take them off campus, they escort them through county vehicles, they take them to Planned Parenthood, they have an abortion, they come back and they never have to tell the parents. It's crazy.
There's been a law since the 90s in the books. Your child of any age can leave campus to go have an abortion without your consent. They have confidentiality rights. So if you call the school, say, where's my child? They will not tell you where your child is.
They have a role play in middle school, and this is in our district. They have a role play, guy, girl and boy together, and they're saying, hey, let's pretend we're going to an abortion clinic. How do I support you? What do we do? How do we get there? How do we find the phone number? Who's going to take us? Let's role play and get through that so we can figure out what to do in case we have that kind of a need. This is in middle school.
If I had the ability to create the situation where my children were educated about comprehensive sexual health at school, I would not have it done through an outside provider. Take the biased political organizations out of it. And I would encourage parents to pursue that with all their might.
This is a booklet that they passed out at a Board of Director Committee from the California Teachers Association. What they state in here is that they're going to write legislature. They're going to write policy stating its support for trans students to have the same rights and decision-making abilities as cis students. Meaning, if a girl can go out and have birth control, they want children to go out and have hormone replacement therapy without what they call the barrier of parental permission.
And there are going to be some kids who have this gender identity confusion, and we should have sympathy for them and they should be helped. But instead of saying, how can we help these kids psychologically, they're saying, well, how can we give them hormones and life-changing, irreversible surgeries which are harmful? And what happens with giving these puberty blocking medications, it stops normal puberty. It actually causes a medical condition by giving these medications. And so of course, if they continue on this path, they're going to be sterilized if they have these organs removed. They can end up with bone disease because their bones didn't develop properly. They probably will have abnormal brain development, psychological repercussions because of this irritability. They've shown increased self-harm. That's puberty blockers. They need psychological help. 90% of suicides are associated with a psychological condition. These kids are going to come to real harm down the road, and they might feel better in the short term, but they need help in the long term.
And some of these are from Positive Prevention Plus. It talks about that's important to remember that someone can have a penis whether or not they're male or female. I mean, that's one of the things that's taught.
Parents are going to be pretty shocked when their children come home and ask, you know, what gender they are. Even for my own self, my son had heard something on the playground, and my daughter too, they're twins, in the 3rd grade, and my son came home asking me, am I a boy? And I asked him, well, why are you asking me that? And he said, because somebody said you could change who you are. And so I had to have a conversation with him. My son, you were born a boy, and you'll always be a boy, and that's what you'll be forevermore. And I don't want you to be confused. And he asked me, how do I know? He asked me that. And I said, how do I know? Because you have a penis, and a boy has a penis, and a girl doesn't. A girl has a vagina, and you do not have a vagina. You have a penis, and so that makes you a boy. And your sister doesn't, and that makes her a girl. They just both kind of went, okay. You know, that was it.
How do kids learn? They learn through modeling. They learn through exposure. We are pleasure-seeking people until we have the structure, discipline, and control. So when we're born, it is all about pleasure. This sex education class is focusing on pleasure, but we are supposed to be focusing on tools to become productive adults.
Parents across the state are keeping their kids home from school today. They say the new sex ed program is too inappropriate, adding the curriculum sexualizes children as young as kindergarten age.
Without question, there is a growing movement of parents across the country who are speaking out and objecting to what's taking place. It doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter where you're from. If you've got children, you're going to care.
And it's not just here in California. It's like all over the country.
If it's in California, I know many other states are doing it as well. This is not far behind. It's going to be everywhere.
Go to the State Department of Education website and look up sexuality standards and find out whether it's a comprehensive sex education state or a sexual risk avoidance education state. And ask the school district, could we possibly have a sexual risk avoidance education program?
And the most precious part of every family and every parent, that's our children. Especially for immigrants like us. We worked so hard. We paid so much price to come to this country. But we come here and find out California is really messed up, and our children are forced to take the garbage.
We have a quote. It says, we will stop at nothing to protect our kids.
One thing I want to let parents know is this, okay? You need to take your power back, okay? It is your job to tell the school district and the government how you want your kids to be raised and what you want them to learn. That is not their job to do that. They forget sometimes, they work for us. We do not work for them, okay? So it's time for parents to stand up.
They need to see that parents are not okay with this and that they're flooding the board meetings. You guys need to be flooding board meetings, every single board meeting. You need your voice to be heard.
Go with 2 or 3 people, and each person will compliment the speaker prior to, so that your statement is only not a 3-minute long thing, but now you're talking 12 to 15 minutes. You'll get your point across.
You vote for school board. Your school board in your district can do all types of things to stop this.
Parents should be running for school board. You have to have a strong inner self. You need to listen to the parents. You need to go make visits to your district.
You know, I want to say to the parent that has never been involved in fighting back against legislation, don't be afraid, don't be discouraged, don't be intimidated. All you have to do is start educating yourself, and you're going to start feeling the passion rise up inside of you, and you're going to be driven.
We need the churches that come in and lead this effort. They have the skills, they have the people, they have the resources.
Participate in the state activities that we're doing, whether it's Informed Parents of California, whether it's a different group.
It involves building a relationship with government officials.
In the meantime, while we're doing this, take more responsibility for your child's education personally. And although you may not be able to homeschool some of you, I think that it's important that you be involved in what the child is doing.
As a taxpayer, you can go to any district, to any school to review any material that you want.
Whether you're a single parent or a two-parent home, prepare yourself for these conversations. But we need to be able to respond to those things without getting angry, without getting shocked, and to respond appropriately.
Public education is not free. Public education is very costly.
You as a parent, take the day off. You say gotta work? We all have to work. Take the day off. Sit in that class and hear what your child is doing.
A lot of confusion has arisen in just the last 3 or 4 years about the California Healthy Youth Act and about parents' rights to opt out. Some school districts are now telling parents they can't opt out of controversial instruction in areas such as gender identity and expression. To clear up the confusion, Pacific Justice Institute developed a Q&A on this important topic that includes sections from the statutes themselves so that parents can read and understand and be even more informed.
Many parents don't know this, is that the new curriculum framework, which pushes all kinds of things dealing with orientation, sexual identity, etc., parents cannot opt out of that material unless your school district has merged these materials together and formed comprehensive sex ed. Then you can opt your child out of all of it. And we're working with school districts up and down the state of California to try to bring this about.
Schools are required to tell parents at the start of the school year what they plan to teach about sex education.
The public school system, the situation that we have there now, didn't get there overnight, so it's not going to be corrected overnight. I'd encourage families, if they can at all, get their children out of the public school system. But by all means, don't leave the argument, don't leave the fight, because there are so many children that are in the public school whose parents just don't know.
Home-based education, or what we can now call homeschooling, is thousands of years old. That's what people have done all over the world.
Many are saying to themselves, I can't homeschool. That's going to be too hard, or I'm a single parent. There's no way I can do this. Well, there's another option. That is, work with your church to form homeschool consortiums. It's just a group of parents working together to help tutor the children, keep them on track, and make sure those kids get a quality education. This could be an incredible way to reach out to your community and introduce people not only to homeschooling, but also to a caring church body.
This is not just about my children or your children. These are about children that are not even born yet. This is a movement where we're on the front lines, and I'm going to tell you, this is a parent revolution that is being started right now, and we need all of you. All of you are an army of people to rise up to fight for kids.
In today's discussion, we're talking about solutions on how we deal with these major problems regarding this new sexual revolution taking place in our public schools. And now we have with us to join in this conversation Pastor Jack Hibbs, the pastor of Calvary Chapel of Chino Hills. Pastor Jack, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brad.
Now, Pastor Jack, you're not a passive pastor. You're all about connecting and reaching out to your community. What practical advice do you have for parents who want to fight back against this radical sexualization of their children taking place right now in public schools?
Yeah, well, Brad, first of all, this is not the first time America and California has gone through this. If we remember back to the eras of the 60s and the early 70s, there was this, quote, sexual revolution. And the reason why that came about was there was a disconnect from the parent and the child. It was a time of an era of experimentation, and it was a very prosperous time where parents were achieving their dreams at the expense of losing their child. And that's repeating, Brad, today. The good thing is we have learned something about that. I believe that the most important thing that a parent can do right now is to get involved in every aspect of their child's life to find out who's speaking into their lives, what's being taught in the public school or in whatever school system that they're in, and really get involved. For some reason, I think parents today think that we hand our kids over to the public system thinking or believing that they have our child's best interest in mind, when that is not the case. They have an agenda to propagate. And so getting involved in PTA, getting involved in the education process, finding out. You know, it is legal, the last time I checked, Brad, where a parent can actually audit a class. They can sit in and listen. So I think engagement is where we need to begin. Engagement is what helped us decades ago, and I think it's more needed now than ever.
Yeah, and I know, like, for example, there have been teachers that have complained that parents may be watching their child in their homeschool curriculum, and they're afraid that parents are going to see what the children are actually being taught. So there is obviously a need for parents to be involved if we have that kind of concern over parents finding out what their children are being taught. Now, you've been a strong advocate for the protection of children. Why do you think parents today should be considering homeschooling in view of what's taking place?
Well, Brad, your question's timely, because what we're watching in California, which is not being reported publicly, is the explosion of the homeschool movement. In light of the COVID situation, it brought light to parents when their children were sequestered at home, just what the kids were learning and not learning. And so we saw curriculum be purchased and people staying at home to teach their kids. And Brad, what we're seeing now are parents deciding after these months of being quarantined, hey, my kid's pretty deficient in a lot of basic areas, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I need to talk to a homeschool network, a homeschool co-op. And I'm just speaking regarding the populace of our church. So here's the great thing about that. Nobody cares more about your child's education than you do, and nobody cares more about their innocence and their protection. And so California, I know we get a bad rap on just about every turn, but California, it's my understanding that California is the fastest growing homeschool population in the United States. The reason is, Brad, I mean, it's just flat out true. The fruit of what happens to a homeschool child in California is undeniably positive.
Yes. In fact, I understand that the stats show that homeschoolers outperform not only academically, public schools and even many private schools, but they also advance faster in corporations that they end up working for later on in life. So there's tremendous advantages to homeschooling. Well, Pastor, where do you think America is headed when it comes to this sexual revolution, and what should parents' response be to this big challenge?
Well, Brad, let's first of all recognize that it's not the 60s anymore, and it's not the 70s. We live in a sexually charged age to the point where I personally believe, Brad, that the new religion of America is sex. That's what we're facing. So what does that mean? That means we have on the social public scene the justification of all things pleasure. In other words, it's that old adage, Brad, if it feels good, do it. We're in a humanistic existential age that is all about self-pleasure. The cool thing is the Bible warned us that we'd be living in the days that we're experiencing, that men would be lovers of themselves rather than lovers of God. So having said that, does that mean we throw our hands up without hope? Absolutely not. It just means that we become that discipler as a parent, because look, God has ordained every one of these parents listening right now and watching this to be a parent. It wasn't a mistake, God knows. And so we need to step up and take the reins of this divine calling. And might I say this, Brad, from a pastor's heart, raising your child for these 18 or 20 years will pay out far better dividends and give you far more rewards and pleasure than divorcing yourself from your child to make the payment on the sailboat or the airplane or the Porsche. Now, that sounds tough in Southern California, but it is a proven fact that the families we've watched pour into their kids, they're the ones that come out of this, Brad, rejoicing because God says he will honor his word. And that also means that he will honor obedience to the values that God has established.
Right. Having children is not just a task. It's not a side hobby. It's a major responsibility. And Pastor Jack, I so appreciate all that you're doing through your church, through your private Christian school, through your ministry online, to really exhort the body of Christ and parents to live their faith in a day that we have today. Thank you so much for joining us, and I really appreciate you participating in this discussion.
Thank you, Brad.
Take care. And help us talk about the real solutions that you can utilize as a parent facing these problems. We have with us here Rebecca Kosas. Thank you for joining us, Rebecca.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Brad.
And we also have with us here Gracie Vandermark. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Rebecca, I want to start with you. Homeschoolers are small in number right now, but yet I understand the recent polls show that roughly 40% or more of parents are actually right now seriously considering homeschooling. Why should they?
Homeschooling provides parents with the most liberty to make sure that their children are being taught what they want their children to be taught. Also, it allows them to control that negative content that they don't want their children to be taught. For instance, like we just saw in this sex ed video, which was absolutely shocking to me. Parents don't have to allow that to be happening to their children. Parents have the ability, these are their children, and they can take control of their children's education. Homeschooling is the best way to do that.
Now, Gracie, you're an activist. You've gone to school board meetings. You've been very involved as a parent. Many parents, though, feel that, they go to open house, they talk to the teacher, everything seems fine. Why should parents be more involved than just simply talking to the teacher once at the beginning of the year?
Well, the problem is the majority of the teachers I have spoken to do not know this is happening, because this is happening in sex ed. Not every teacher teaches sex ed. Not even the administrators, because another thing I do is I travel from district to district showing them what their curriculums is exposing students to, and they are shocked.
So the administrators don't even necessarily
They don't know. My job has been for the last 3 years to walk into districts with my iPad, click on their links, and show them the porn sites and all of this inappropriate information our children are exposed to. I've been glad to see that every teacher I've showed this to is shocked enough to say that's not happening in my class, and they actually volunteer to let us know if there's anything else going on we should know about.
Okay, now, Rebecca, one of the main reasons parents don't homeschool is that they both work. And to them, it's just not practical. How can people in that situation, how can parents who are in the circumstance where they both work be able to homeschool? Is that an option at all?
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, Brad, I think parents are making the transition from it's not practical because we both work to we've got to make it work now. It's very important to them. And I think the important thing for parents that are both working to consider is just erase your preconceived notions of what school time looks like and what work time looks like. And employers are much more flexible now with work hours, especially during the COVID time. But both parents are working, they're absolutely able to enroll their children in some online programming where they received teaching via satellite, but the parents are still there in charge. Also, the homeschool community has been working together for decades, sharing gifts and sharing their strengths. One parent teaching one day, another parent teaching another day. That we call this team teaching. They've set up hybrid programs where the children are in classes at a church for maybe 1 or 2 days a week, and then parents are taking sharing these responsibilities to teaching one another's children. Parents are are creative, and they're coming up with so many wonderful creative ideas to make sure that their children get a good education now, especially in these pandemic times. And I hand it to them, and we're happy to help them.
Yeah,
so.
I think the main reason why parents don't homeschool is just because of that. They both work. They don't see it there's a viable solution.
Mm-hmm.
But what you just alluded to, I think, is a powerful solution. Church homeschool co-ops,
Mm-hmm.
where the parents have their children meet at a church 2 days a week, say Tuesday and Thursday, and then the other 3 days they work together as a team. So if Billy's mom and dad are working on Monday, Billy goes over to Johnny's house where his mom or dad are there to homeschool. And so they team teach, they work together. Is that actually happening? Do we actually see that taking place?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's happening more and more. It's a phenomenon, I would have to say, Brad, that we're seeing develop because of the circumstances now. And I honestly have to tell you that we need more churches that are willing to get involved and provide a space for parents to do this, because they need the support of their churches, the churches behind them, and offering opportunities and facilities for them. So yeah, it's happening. And what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention, and this is exactly what's happening right now. So,
okay, Gracie, as parents become aware of what's going on, what's their first step that they should take right now to protect their children, whether it's in kindergarten, preschool, high school? What should they be doing?
The first thing I would recommend they do is go to their district office and ask to review all the material their children will be exposed to. It might seem like a lot of work, but they have the time. I've tried going to school board meetings. They're of no help. They've become so politicized that I bypass the school boards and I go directly to the administration. I sit down in their office. You can sit down, review any material you want. By law, they have to show you what you ask them for. And just sit there and look at it. Also ask them, will there be outside resources you're going to be using? Are there brochures, websites, books? Are teachers allowed to bring their own unvetted material into the schools? Those are really important things you need to ask, because as you sit in the school, they'll show you a book, but they won't tell you that there are websites they're going into, there's a pamphlet they're going into, and they won't tell you there are speakers that are being brought into that we have no idea is happening. So you need to ask for full disclosure of what your child is going to be exposed to.
Okay, now, if they ask for just the information about sex education, is that good enough?
No.
Why?
Because this material has spread out throughout health and science. You can find it in our history books now. It's everywhere. Check the social studies books. You ask for everything your child is going to see. Our children are worth it. I've sat there for 4 straight hours several times. I've done this many times to review books. I don't even have kids in that district anymore. But I do inform the parents about what's happening. I take pictures. I show them, because a lot of the parents have a hard time believing this is happening. And one of the biggest problems is that the teachers are not aware, so they say it's not true. The districts are not aware, so even they deny that it's happening because they just don't know.
All right, so we've seen how dangerous this new sex education material can be, not just in California, but actually also in 17 other major city school districts across the United States, and it's growing. So you're probably asking yourself, is there anything out there that we can utilize in substitute for this horrific curriculum? And the answer is yes. We have with us now to join us Joy Wassel to talk about an alternative sex education curriculum that you as a parent will probably find much more beneficial to your child. Joy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Brad.
So Joy, we have this controversial comprehensive sex education curriculum being utilized in California and other cities across the country. What's the difference between comprehensive sex education and sexual risk avoidance education?
Brad, sexual risk avoidance education is basically what we've been teaching in health education for many, many years. It's called risk avoidance, and we teach it in areas such as healthy eating, what to avoid. And the goal of avoidance education is to produce optimal health in whatever topic area of health you might be addressing. So if you're addressing a high school age population and you want to communicate to them the dangers of smoking or drinking or vaping or any of those health risk behaviors, then you would want them to understand the goals and the benefits of avoidance behavior. What we teach is that the very best optimal health for you as a teenager, an unmarried person, is to avoid the risks associated with sexual behaviors prior to marriage, STDs, STIs, pregnancy, out of wedlock pregnancy. But what we really want them to understand that there are emotional components, there are impacts from these decisions that last an entire lifetime, and sexual risk avoidance has been proven by study after study to have the highest impact towards success than the comprehensive sex ed programs do. They encourage sexual activity. They encourage risky behavior. And trust me, as a high school teacher, again, risky behaviors travel together.
So how do we actually get sexual risk avoidance curriculum in our government schools?
You ask for it, and you have to become knowledgeable about what is being taught currently in your school system. And that's going to flow from your state Department of Education through what's called health standards or state education standards. And it starts in kindergarten. So there are standard behaviors for K through 2, and then 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and then 9 through 12. The more vague the standard, the more likely you are to have comprehensive sex ed. You want to get involved and say, okay, what exactly does that mean? Can you show me the curriculum? Can you show me the professional development that you participated in over the summer, and what online materials are going to be taught to the children? Because that's the new wave and the new trend. The teachers are required to go to professional development. And during that professional development, they're going to be taught a new curriculum. In Metro Nashville schools, for example, here in Nashville, Tennessee, there's a project, a curriculum called the Trevor Project. And it is supposed to be an anti-bullying program. However, it is a sexual orientation, gender identity exploration for all students in the 9th grade. You will never find that in the state standards of the state of Tennessee. It's not there.
Okay, well, how does this sexual risk avoidance curriculum actually benefit students? What have you actually seen firsthand?
What they tell us over and over and over again is, I had no idea the impact of these choices on my future. Thank you. Thank you for teaching us this. Thank you. And even some of the students who've already been sexually active, they will tell us on their end of course tests that we give them. We do a pre and a post test. They'll say, I had no idea how much this behavior was going to impact my future. I'm going to choose from this day forward to be more concerned about my future. The vast majority of high school students are not having sex. So if people are telling you that they are, or you're believing the lie that everyone is, then you're following a path that's not even true. And really, all we want you to know is the truth. And so it's an empowering program, and it's one that teachers, for the most part, love.
Well, Joy, I'm sure many parents are wanting to get this information. What do they do? Where do they go to be able to get this information to their school principal, to their administration, to be able to make this a reality in their community?
One of the best things that parents can do is you need to find out what's being taught in your local school district. And that's going to include two things. What does our school teach as far as sexuality is concerned? Don't ask about sex, ask about sexuality. That's the word to use. And who's teaching it? Is it the classroom teacher teaching it? And where is your curriculum? Where does that curriculum come from? And then ask that question. Do any of your materials come from online sources? If so, could you forward those to me? And you want to read them, and you want to look for buzzwords such as risk reduction, because International Planned Parenthood, you will learn on the Stop CSE website, is very involved with the WHO, the World Health Organization. The CDC is behind this. They are pushing a very, very radical sex education program internationally. And there are countries that are trying to push back against that. And then you want to know what your state says are the standards in human growth and development, in sexuality, in sex education, family life education, whatever it's called, where is the sexuality content taught? And reading is one of the dominant areas in elementary school where sexuality and gender identity and gender orientation are explored. So you want to find out what's in your school library, what's your local school doing, and then what's your state saying is the standard. And is your state a sexual risk reduction / comprehensive sex ed state? Or is it a sexual risk avoidance state / abstinence education?
Well, Joy, thank you so much for what you're doing, and I appreciate your time, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Brad. It's been an honor to share. Thank you so much for having me on.
Okay, now Gracie, I know many parents feel that they're alone in this fight. What can they do to be able to band together on a local level so they're not going it alone?
Well, they're not alone. We have tens of thousands of parents just on Informed Parents of California, and we have other sub-pages with more parents. The first thing I think parents should do is connect with other parents that feel the same. What we found when parents come to Informed Parents, we have Informed Parents of Orange County as well, and Informed Parents of California. If you come on in there are other parents that think like you, and then they offer you advice. We've seen a lot of parents that were hesitant at first to homeschool. They've gone on to the page, and then they find parents that are close by them or that are willing to help, and then that empowers them, and they go on ahead and they move on to homeschooling.
Rebecca, what about people who, they say, gosh, I want to homeschool. Where do I go? Are there organizations that I can contact? This is a nice underhand serve for you here, but I want to get out that information because there's great organizations that they can be in contact with, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, our organization, CHEA of California, if you go to CHEA of CA.org, you're going to find all kinds of information on how to get started. We have a related blog. We have virtual events that we've recorded. It's called an online digital pass. All of our new homeschooling virtual events are in one place. So it's relatively easy for parents to homeschool in California. They fall under the private school statute. So they establish a private school in their home. They withdraw their children formally from their school. Their new school that they've created requests records to be transferred to their new school, and then in October they file what we call a private school affidavit notifying the state that they have a private school. No need to wait until October, I should say. They start teaching their children when they're ready to start teaching. It's that simple.
And there's also a list, by the way, on our website of all the different homeschooling organizations across the country that you can take advantage of, you can connect with, along with CHEA, to be able to be empowered to have all your questions answered and to look at different resources and different kind of curriculum that are out there online. It's incredible, isn't it, the number of different alternatives that are there for parents to choose and to look at.
It's a rich field for parents to choose from. Parents who are people of faith, parents who are not people of faith. There's too much to choose from, actually. I'm being told that it's just overwhelming. So resources, there's no lack of. It's just a matter of parents making this decision to take control of their children's education, to say, as you said, Gracie, they're my kids, and step out, withdraw them from the public school, and tell the school that they've established their new school and start homeschooling. Right. It's just as simple as that.
Now, you're a parent. You may have your children right now in a public school, a government school. For many of you, you're thinking, this is fantastic. I can homeschool. I can put my child in a private Christian school. Or I can form a church homeschool co-op and get one of those going in my church. Others of you, for whatever reason, may be in a different situation where those are not valid options right now. And Gracie, I understand that that's basically been your experience, is working with parents who, for whatever reason, have their children in government schools.
Yes. There are many parents who are not ready to make the transition or just are not able. But there are actions they can take. Number one is participation. Volunteer, go check the curriculum out, befriend your district staff, just so they know you are there, you're present, and you're watching. Whatever you can do to be more vigilant will be a good start. building that relationship with the administration is the way that I found was a lot more beneficial. And we've actually made a lot of change by going directly to the administration and talking to them.
So before the board meeting, have that relationship, visit with maybe the board members on a one-on-one or the administration.
Absolutely.
And develop that relationship and then go from there. I even know there are some school districts that we at Pacific Justice Institute have worked with to form parental review committees that actually have to review and approve outside material before it can be implemented. So there's great opportunities that can come from those relationships. I'm really glad you're doing that and implementing that with parents in your communities.
Thank you.
Conversely, parents who are homeschooling, they shouldn't just simply wash their hands of public schools, should they?
No, absolutely not. I know you're doing what you feel like is the best for your own children, but we need to keep the rest of the children in mind. This is the next generation of our country, so stay involved.
Yeah.
That's what all my children are adults, so I don't need to do it, but because I know I have the time now, whereas a mom with toddlers might not, then do it. We can, whatever time, whatever energy we can put into this will help. Staying involved. It's for our community, our neighbors' kids who will go to public school. Even if you homeschool, will be part of the community. So it does affect us as a whole.
Right. And we spend a lot of time here talking about government schools or public schools, as well as homeschooling, church homeschool co-ops. But let's not forget, folks, that there are some fantastic private schools out there that are parent-friendly, that really care and think and believe the way you do about your children. So go to our website, pji.org, and there you'll find a reference to an organization that you can look at, and it will help you work through what private school might be out there that's best for your child. Folks, there's a lot of problems, but the good news, there's a lot of solutions to those problems. And it's your job as a parent not to put your head in the sand, but to look at these problems and solutions and to do something. Do something. After all, they are your children, and they're also the future.